The activity of our labors was such that we should soon, at the rate we were going, have dug the island all over, and we had but a small fraction of it. Napoleon, perceiving that we should come too soon to the end of our task, slackened our exertions, and I remained alone with him to finish the sowing. I broke the furrows, he threw the seed and covered it over, arguing at the same time, relating some anecdote, and only stopping now and then for a joke. One day, as he was arranging a bed of French beans, he perceived some small roots and began a dissertation upon the phenomena of vegetation. He analyzed them and descanted upon them with his usual sagacity, drawing from them the conclusion of the existence of a superior being who presides over the wonders of nature. You do not believe in all that, doctor. You physicians are above those weaknesses. Tell me, you who are so well acquainted with the human frame, who have searched it in all its turnings and windings, have you ever met with the soul under your scalpel? Where does the soul reside? In what organ? I hesitated to answer. Come, be sincere. That is not a physician that believes in God, is there? No, sire. They are seduced by the example. They imitate mathematicians. How so? Mathematicians are in general religious. However, your recrimination reminds me of a singular expression used by one of them. I was conversing with L and congratulating him upon a new work he had just published. I asked him how it happened that the name of God, so often used in the works of Lagrange, had never once occurred in his. It is, answered he, because I have not found it necessary to have recourse to that hypothesis. I employed anecdote in my turn and quoted Lalande and a few others, but he still persevered in his opinion. We were, generally speaking, atheists, and moreover, as deficient in courage as in faith, we were frightened out of our wits as soon as the cannon began to roar. The sight of a field of battle disconcerted the most skillful of us, and it was only by dint of time and habit that we acquired the confidence necessary to enable us to perform our operations. He had often thought how to obviate this disorder, and he had wished that no medical man might be allowed to practice or to solicit patronage or protection until he had served in 1 or 2 campaigns. Had he known me, he would have obliged me also to pass first through that ordeal. This discussion led him to speak of some of his expeditions, and he rendered ample justice to the services of the officers of the military surgical department, praised their zeal, their activity, and extolled the firmness and perseverance of which they had given proofs on several occasions under circumstances of great difficulty. He had, it is true, always watched over and encouraged that department, and had even in some cases himself taken care to see the prescriptions duly followed. A fever committed great ravages amongst the troops that were besieging Mantua, and the exhausted soldiers, sinking under the disease, refused the assistance of the medical men. The general hastened to the spot, threw bark into the casks of wine, and distributed this infusion with his own hand to the different corps as they defiled before him. The care and anxiety of their general revived the courage of the soldiers. They submitted to the use of medicine and found themselves better still. It was only when this kind of contagion had entirely disappeared that he ceased to watch in person over the health of the troops. In Egypt, he had done more, every means calculated to prevent the occurrence of disease or to limit its duration had been inquired into, settled, and regulated by himself. Baths, cleanliness, or other measures conducive to health were the constant subjects of his orders of the day. He had even determined the posts of Boulac and the limits beyond which the convalescents were not to pass. The gardens are spacious enough there. Let them walk without going out of them, lest a popular commotion or reverse should expose them to the dagger of the Turks. In Syria, the sick and the wounded were the unceasing objects of his solicitude. He caused hospitals to be established at Jaffa, Ramesh, Shephammer, and nothing could be equal his grief when he heard that a wretch had employed on a private speculation the camels appointed for the transport of medicines. He was going to have the guilty individual tried and shot. In short, there was no punishment sufficiently severe for so infamous an action, but the court to which he belonged would have been disgraced without any relief being afforded to the brave wounded, and he therefore spared the wretch's life and dismissed him from the service. Saint Jean d'Acre received reinforcements. We sustained losses and were obliged to raise the siege of the place. The first thing to be done under these circumstances was to remove the wounded. On this occasion, the anxiety of the general was particularly conspicuous. But I am not relating what I have heard. I am quoting what I have read and shall not stoop to discuss a base calumny. Camp before Acre, 22nd Floreal, 7th year of the Republic, 11th May, 1799. To Rear Admiral Perret. Rear Admiral Gantillon will give you directions how to carry away 400 or 500 wounded, whom I send to Tentura, and whom it is absolutely necessary that you should transport to Alexandria and Damietta. Your zeal, your intelligence, and your nautical skill will overcome every obstacle, and you and your crews will acquire more glory by this action than from the most brilliant engagement. No crews will ever have been so useful as yours, and no frigates will have ever rendered a more essential service to the Republic than those under your command. Camp before Acre, 27th Floreal, 7th year of the Republic, 16th May, 1799. To General Dubois. You must have received a battalion of the 4th Regiment of Light Infantry, which I dispatched a fortnight ago, and which must have reached Cairo by this time. In 3 days I shall march to Cairo with the whole army. I am only delayed by the transport of the wounded, of whom I have 600 or 700. I have carried the principal points within the outer enclosure of Acre, but we have not thought proper to persist in attacking the second enclosure, because it would have occasioned a loss of too much time and too many men. The Gesar received 2 days ago a reinforcement of 500 or 600 men and 30 large Greek vessels. This expedition was destined for Alexandria. Perret has taken 2 of those vessels, in which were gunners, bombardiers, miners, and several pieces of cannon. Adopt measures to render the navigation of Damietta secure, in order that the wounded may pass rapidly into the hospitals of Cairo. Camp before Acre, 27th Floreal, 7th year of the Republic, 16th May, 1799. To Adjutant General Almaraz. I am going to send as many wounded as I possibly can to Damietta. If the communications are open, pass them on immediately to Cairo, where they will find more comfort. The number will be about 400 or 500. It will be necessary to have at Faraj a certain number of boats ready for the sick or wounded that may be with us. Camp before Acre, 27th Floreal, 7th of the year of the Republic, 16th May, 1799. To Adjutant General Boyer. Send the wounded to Jaffa or on board the frigates. The Adjutant General Turan, who is at Kaifa, will send you tomorrow a large convoy of them. Make arrangements that on the morning of the 13th there be neither sick nor wounded at Tentura. 200 wounded will be sent tomorrow to Tentura coming from Mount Carmel. Pass them on to Jaffa immediately. Embark as much of your artillery that has been sent to you at Jaffa as you possibly can, without inconveniencing the sick. Let me have tomorrow night an exact statement of the prisoners sent away and of those remaining. Let the wounded be informed that the enemy has attempted a sortie and has lost 400 men and had 9 flags taken from him. Camp before Acre, 27th Floreal, 7th year of the Republic, 16th May, 1799. To Adjutant General Turk. Tomorrow morning, march 400 wounded upon Tentura. Adjutant General Boyer informs me that he has this day sent 400 by land and 150 by sea. You inform me that you only sent 100 today. It is therefore possible that the frigates might come in and there be no wounded yet arrived for them to take, which would be unfortunate. Therefore, lose not a moment. Let me have tomorrow at 12 o'clock a statement of the wounded at Kaifa and Mount Carmel. The sick must be sent off separately. On the evening of the 29th night, a single sick or wounded must remain in Kaifa. To General Berthier, Chief of the Staff, please give immediate orders for the establishment of 2 hospitals in the village of Schefhammer, one for the wounded, the other for the sick with fever. These 2 hospitals shall be established in the castle. Tomorrow, 12 o'clock, all the sick and wounded now in the movable hospitals and in the camp hospital, and all the sick in the camp itself will be sent to those hospitals. A pharmacy will be established, a commissary, the head of the medical, and that of the surgical department, and the director of hospitals will immediately repair to the village of Schefhammer in order to organize the said hospitals. The captain of the dromedaries to be appointed commandant of the village. Its garrison will be composed of the 3rd Battalion of the 18th, with the exception of the company of grenadiers. I shall quote another document. To date on, the place in, and the circumstances under which it was written, render it one of great value. At this distance, painful recollections are not cherished, and still less revived. I allude to the instructions given to the Duke of Treviso when Napoleon evacuated Moscow. I have extracted them from the memoirs of one of his aides-de-camp, who, having made the campaign of Egypt, must have been fully acquainted with the particularities of the antidote, to which allusion is made by the emperor in those instructions. We passed our time in gardening and conversing, natural history, medicine, war, politics, everything that fell under the observation or occurred to the memory of the emperor became, in turn, the subject of our discussion. But if the conversation suggested any circumstance that recalled to his mind either the empress or his son, he immediately abandoned every other subject to talk exclusively of the amiable qualities of the one and the destiny of the other. What a forlorn state, what misfortunes! But he had his father's name, and he would possess his father's courage. He would not suffer that inheritance to depart from him. And passing abruptly to Maria Louisa, as if he feared to contemplate the future prospects of the child, he expatiated in the highest terms on her goodness, her sweetness of disposition, and the unalterable affection she bore him. He fully repaid that affection, and he perhaps owed his ruin to it. He had loved her, and had he loved her less, he should not have written the fatal letter which fell into the hands of the Allies. He would probably have been followed and victorious, and France would have been saved. Fate decided otherwise. He abdicated, and the Empress was obliged to retire to Vienna. The repeated shocks she had been exposed to produced their effect. The health of that princess became deranged, and the physicians advised her to drink the waters of Aix, whither she accordingly went. F., who was also there for the same purpose, immediately took the alarm. Maria Louisa was accompanied by Madame de Brignol, Corvisart, and Isabey, and Talma had also made his appearance. It was clear, therefore, that a conspiracy existed, and that the throne was in danger, and no time ought to be lost in resorting to every means calculated to defeat the plot. He wrote, begged, denounced, and stimulated the exertions of both civil and military authorities. To the former he applied for their spies, to the latter to their gendarmes. Every step of the Empress was to him a subject of terror. She, however, lived with the simplest manner possible, walking, mixing with the crowd, and only busying herself about the fine sights and prospects the country offered, climbing the mountains to obtain a sight of them with the activity natural to her. But she listened to the recital of lines recalling our exploits. She cherished the name of her husband. She adored her son. All that was quite enough to prevent F. and the Duke of C from closing their eyes. Another circumstance tended to increase their fears. She had received some of our soldiers under her protection and collected in that manner about 12 or 1,500 men. She was going to conquer France. Le Cronier endeavored to avert this dire misfortune. He had some troops and an orderly officer, and he attempted to close the passage of St. Jacques against the Austrian couriers. But Neipperg, incensed at the affront, threatened. The gendarmes dared not proceed to further extremities, and poor F. remained a prey to his anxiety. That anxiety was sufficiently ridiculous. Men, circumstances, events, everything gave him umbrage, and he was quite in despair on observing that the heart of Maria Louisa continued devoted to the interest of Napoleon. But the measure of his anguish was filled when he saw that the departure of the Empress, which had had been fixed for the 1st of September did not take place. This unexpected delay nearly turned his brain. He could think of nothing but disastrous flight and insurrections. It was evident this departure had been retarded by instructions from the island of Elba. Not the shadow of a doubt could be entertained on that subject. Poor A, beset on all sides by these fears, yielded at last to a sentiment he himself had never known. True it is that he was also guided by some motives of his own, and that he had grown old. This circumstance, however, had the effect of restoring to him the activity of his youth. Spies, dispatches, he found time to attend to everything. He sent to reconnoiter Italy and sought to rally the nation round its sovereign, and what is more, its legitimate sovereign. Do you know to what measure he thought of having recourse in order to obtain this great result? To a coronation. On the same day, at the same hour, troops, public functionaries, the whole population of France were to repair to their temples, there to proclaim, what? Their gratitude? Assuredly, there were ample reasons for feeling the most lively gratitude, but it was for the hero of blank to come forward as the capuchin of that party. Ought a man to be thus false to his own glory? Ought he on the verge of existence to tarnish his own fame? But time wears out everything, even personal dignity. Whilst the emperor was speaking thus, he perceived Reed. As to that man, said he is beyond the reach of time. I defy it to make him baser than he is. He is like the steel that blunts the edge of the file. He was worthy of being yoked with our Calabrian. You flatter him, sire, for his productions are very indifferent, whereas Sir Hudson's poetry is delightful. What? Is this spy a poet? Yes, sire, he writes Latin verse with the same elegance as French. He is the Tityrus of the Col de Tondé. Judge, you had baffled British sagacity, taken Malta and Alexandria, and threatened the establishments of England on the Red Sea. She was trembling for her trade and was arming at Bombay, at Gibraltar, at Calcutta. And Admiral Blanket had sailed to go and excite the Arabs to revolt. All these precautions were, however, insufficient to calm the apprehensions of England. She felt that to arrest your progress, it was necessary to fire the whole world. As she went about Europe begging for war, but finding that your name chilled every courage, she imagined to spread the report of your death, Lowe put into the news, into verse, and had it stuck up in Italy. The morceau ran thus. Bonaparte a été pris à Alexandrie, il a perdu sa funeste vie. François tremblez, vous serez guillotiné. Anyway. For guillotine, read blank. Everyone must speak his own language, but is that all? No, sire. And here's something better. It's Latin. Algorum russus virtutum senti fur cav jam and inferon u Bonaparte sedit. So much for his poetry, but what do you know about his exploits? Very little. Sire, affairs of that kind were out of the circle of my pursuits, and I did not listen to them with any great degree of attention. However, as I was very much in the world at Florence, and as my profession gave me access to every family, I could not but collect numberless valuable details. One spoke of the intention of the King of Sardinia to exasperate the French in order to obtain the crown of martyrdom. Another exposed the plans of the ministers of his government and the hopes they built upon the Franc chasseurs. The army commanded by Brune had been on the point of being completely destroyed. Every prince was to feign the existence of insurrections in his dominions to stimulate alarms and apply for assistance. And when our forces would have been scattered by these means, Austria was to march, the people to fly to arms, and our army, to the last man, was to be sacrificed. Arms, ammunition, and men had been procured. Everything was arranged when the lady of the court felt some scruples, which she confided to her confessor. The confessor betrayed ministers, put Brune on his guard, and the plot failed. I learned in the same way the intrigues which had for such a length of time disturbed Liguria, agitated the Cisalpine states, and fired Bologna. The object of Beccolozzi was to be bought by the aristocracy. Lowes had his own views. Fenaroli cherished his own chimera. Everyone intrigued and entertained the most culpable hope Somariva carried on a secret correspondence in Lucca. Porro excited the disaffected of Genoa. Zordi those of Anaglia. At the moment when a man thought himself secure in his existence, new wars sprang up and conquests were meditated. The presence of our troops checked the views of the ambitious, and they therefore disposed their measures in consequence. They threw difficulties in the way of the service, excited the population, encouraged every excess. Nothing was seen or heard of but insurrections, assassinations, and disasters, and we were repulsed to the cold de ten. Our enemies, seeing that we had experienced reverses, thought it advisable to endeavor to stir up the South to revolt and murder. England dispatched Low for that purpose. He crept like a malefactor on the mountains occupied by our troops, organized a few obscure plots, and hastily fled when he heard of your victories.